WBAP. I am your host, James Parker, and my next guest, Victoria Churchill from the Daily Mail, back on the James Show. Victoria, I got to tell you, I know, good to see you too. I'm a little concerned here because I saw the videos of people being executed in the street in Gaza. And so, I was thinking a ceasefire meant people weren't going to be getting murdered in the street anymore. But I guess the ceasefire just means internecine killing amongst the Palestinians themselves is still permitted.
Well, that's a good question. Of course, that peace deal was between Israel and the leaders of Gaza, Hamas, at least at the time, right? And so, I think to Hamas, this is unfortunately how they treat their own people. But of course, that does not have much to do, as far as I'm aware, with international peace deals, which, this was attempted to be.
Well, is that going to somehow derail what's going on? Because Trump was asked about it, and he's like, that needs to stop. But, I mean, is that enough to derail the plans?
Well, I think what's important to note about this deal is that there was actually supposed to be kind of independent monitors and observers. And so, my question is, have those actually been put into place, or are they in the process of being put into place? And if they are monitoring things and observing things that are not along the lines of the deal, kind of what is their actually their method of enforcement? But, I think that definitely remains to be seen. But I am glad that President Trump, is hoping and basically ordering as much as he can. Not sure how much sway his word actually has on those people that are committing these atrocities, but to them it means, I think, that they could face greater consequences if they don't quit this killing.
Well, the other concern I have about this falling apart, Victoria Churchill, is we got all the live hostages back, but some of the bodies we got back of the deceased hostages, I'm hearing some of them aren't matching up, and we haven't got all of them. Something to the tune of, I think it was 19 bodies, the last report I saw. Is that true, and is that something that could ruin the peace process?
Yeah, that was, something that is very important, particularly, at least as far as I'm aware, in the Jewish faith, it's very important to have a body of a deceased individual to perform a proper burial. And so, I remember watching last week that Vice President J.D. Vance was talking about how this deal primarily focused on the living hostages. However, the obtaining of those bodies is still very important. And so, I've talked to some people that have said that that's definitely a more difficult part of the process because Hamas may not know exactly where all of those bodies are, or they have not disclosed where they might have been kept. And so, that's definitely an ongoing thing. But of course, I think it matters very much to the families of those deceased that they do get those bodies back. And, I do think that they're going to do everything in their power to make sure that they get those bodies, those corpses of their loved ones back into their possession to give them a proper burial.
Well, Victoria, we got the hostages back on Monday morning, our time. We've now had a few days to digest it. How is this settling with the people of Israel? Overall, did they like the ceasefire and the terms that they're under right now?
Yeah, there's a couple of moments that I found very interesting. So first off, actually last Saturday night, there was a rally in Israel in what was called Hostages Square, has now been reclaimed actually as, I believe, Freedom Square is the new name. But, to these families that were gathered there, they were the families of the hostages. When Steve Witkoff, who is the special envoy, of course, in the Trump administration, who is kind of the backroom mastermind behind all of this, at least based on what I've heard and seen, that he was talking about the deal. He was talking about Trump's role in it versus Netanyahu's role in it. And based on the footage that I saw, is that Netanyahu was actually booed by some of the hostage families for whatever role he may have played in this, versus Trump was actually praised. So, I thought that was pretty interesting. I was actually doing another news segment where I was part of a panel, and we had a guest call in who's the Israeli spokesperson at the UN, and I actually asked him about that exchange. And, he said that, Israel is a vibrant, thriving democracy, and so at least in his words, they believe in free speech, they believe in free expression. So, he saw that as just somebody expressing their free speech, which he believes that the people of Israel have the right to do.
Well, do we know if the Palestinian people themselves in Gaza are happy with the terms of this deal?
I mean, I think they're definitely happy to not be being fired upon or not be used, in my view, at least as pawns by Hamas terrorists. But, of course, I can't imagine that they're extremely happy because a lot of them don't have homes to return to. That is kind of a harsh reality of this, is that even though they can go back to that land, it's completely destroyed.
I think it's a fair assumption the guys that are getting executed in the street probably aren't happy with the situation, but I don't know. Like, how would you even gauge such a thing? Do they even do polling over there? There's no media that's trustworthy coming out of Gaza. So, I don't know. I was just seeing if both sides are happy with the ceasefire. I think that's a big tell on whether or not the political leaders will make sure it happens.
Yes, there is part of that, and then there was also part of the deal which was ensuring that, aid in particular, food, of course, kind of being the primary component of that aid, was getting to the Palestinians, which, at least by what I'm seeing, it has been. So, I think they're definitely happier than they were a week ago. I can't say that they're over the moon and thrilled. I haven't gone and talked to any of them. And again, I don't really know how many, if any, Western journalists will be able to do that. So, that's some reporting that's going to be done, not by myself, but, I'm definitely going to be watching to see what comes out of that. And again, I think polling is definitely far from being a reality there. But, it'll be interesting to see what stories come out and what we can trust. But, I think overall, everybody is in a better position than they were a week ago. And I think that's pretty easy to determine just based on the information that we do currently have.
Yeah, well, Victoria Churchill, do me a favor while you're reporting at the Daily Mail and keeping an eye on such things. Let me know if any Hamas dealers cite Greta Thunberg's flotilla as a reason why they had to sue for peace, or maybe it was John Cusack's Twitter feed that brought him to the table. I find it hard to believe that all these people are giving Trump credit. When people made a lot of signs over here, and they kept out on college campuses, so that had to do something, Victoria.
They did.
And, that's sarcasm, by the way.
Oh, no, they definitely did. I think there was pressure, even from many in Republican ranks to make sure that this deal happened. I think a lot of people are of the mindset, probably myself included, that if there was different leadership in the White House and in the administration, that this deal would not have happened, that this is really only something that Trump could do. And I think he's getting a lot of the credit that he deserves, even from some prominent Democrats, like, of course, John Fetterman, who has sided with Trump on some things that have upset some pretty progressive wings in his party. But, even the likes of Hillary Clinton, who, of course, ran against Trump in 2016, she's got a little bit of experience, at least, in global diplomacy, having been the Secretary of State in the Obama years. And, she even said, kudos, Trump. But then, of course, there are some dissenting voices in the Congress, particularly on the Democrat side, that aren't happy. But, even some Republican folks, like, for example, Marjorie Taylor Greene, she's not the most thrilled with it as well. So, it's definitely interesting to see what that reception has been domestically, what it will continue to be, and, if that will shift depending on what we do see happening in the Middle East versus what we don't. But, again, I'm also interested to see what this means for Netanyahu domestically in Israel. Whether people will feel like his leadership is one of competency, and if that he is a competent leader, and if he should continue serving in government, or if they will pick somebody else, now that they kind of don't have this unified this enemy of Hamas to unify against, whether they're going to decide to go a different direction.
Yep. All right, agreed to all that. Victoria Churchill, good stuff. You can find her at the Daily Mail and Young Voices. We'll have you back on the James Show soon.